I was just sharing with them a bit of our conversation earlier today about the agenda idea being, let's start off, if anybody has, it sounds like Cindy does, and then also Kim does, in terms of follow up on last week's discussions, and then see what the appetite is for moving forward on this, and then we can wrap it unless anything new comes about. Unless Becky or Lori have anything. Cindy, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. Well, I don't have in front of me because I didn't print it out, but one of the things I sent you, but I went online and just started investigating the CARES Act to find out what it was all about. And I really got a lot of detailed information, which I shared with Kim, or anyways, 2 people got copies of it. But in looking through it, it's very wide open as to what we can apply for, including money for businesses that has closed down, money or who were interrupted in business. Hold on a second. I think if I pull this up, you'll still be able to.
Cindy, if you'd like, I can share those documents that you had sent.
Sure.
Okay, give me just a moment.
But I highlighted some things, and so I just wanted to see if I could pull them.
Why don't you go ahead and share yours then? Because I don't believe I have anything that was.
Well, I just have to find it, and I might have to just print it out. Can y'all still hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a yes. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So just give me 1 second because I had it in documents, but for some reason it's not cooperating. All right. That's the wrong one. Of course, it's the very last one that I pull up. And for some reason, but it just like, to me, it just sounded like as long as you can, there was some budget, and you all can correct me how this works, on March 27th. So if there was a budget in March 27th, anything that happened after that out of the ordinary, including business closures, getting equipment, helping public safety, helping people with mortgage payments, rent, business payments, whatever. And so where my confusion comes in is, where do we just go, hey, we want this amount of money and we get it? Or is there something specific we need to address?
Yeah, I'm sure Kim is the right person to answer, but yes, we have to put forth a proposal. This is what we want the money for, and articulate it, and off we go. Whether we get it or not is a different story. But yes, it's wide open. We just have to figure out what we want to spend the money for and articulate it correctly and go.
It is wide open from everything I read. And, it can be a public emergency. I kept just going, oh, it can be this. Oh, it can be that. And it can be expenditures. Here's a couple of things. Expenditures related to the provisions of grants to small businesses to reimburse the cost of business interruption caused by required closures. Now, how many places in the city of Matthews have been closed due to the coronavirus? And somewhere in the Mecklenburg thing that I think, Kim, you sent out, it showed how much, as of whenever whenever that you got that, it showed how much has already been spent. So there's all this money left, and everything I've researched doesn't give anything specific as to how we apply for it. It sounds like you go, I want this money. And so somebody needs to contact whoever it is we're getting this stuff from and saying, tell me exactly, we want X millions of dollars, how do we get it? And how do we justify that we need it? And it's even got provisions in there. If you don't spend it, you got to give it back. You know, I mean, I kept digging, like somewhere in here, there's going to be something more specific. I mean, there's some things you can't do, you know, that if it doesn't have anything related to the coronavirus, but other than that. So I think we apply for money to help businesses that have been closed. I mean, that was the most repetitive thing I saw, unless we have some public health emergency that we want. The other thing I thought of, if we have to be more specific, and I do not know the answer to this question, so it's a curiosity question, is the free medical clinic. What do they need? I mean, they've been closed, I'm sure, and I'm sure they need masks and you know, all the stuff attached to that. So
I think if I remember right, I believe in talking to her that Amy was going for a grant. I don't know if it's part of the CARES Act, but I think she had because I believe she has a grant writer
PPP.
That she uses.
Yeah, she applied for PPP and she got that.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, because I'm new to all this. Who is Amy?
She runs the
Executive
free
director.
medical clinic.
I'm sorry? She runs, oh, gotcha. Okay.
I guess the question is who is applying for this loan? I assume that the town has already applied for and received its allocation. What is the entity that would not for the grant that would be applying?
Yeah, so if I can maybe jump in here and help clarify a couple things. So so just to kind of reset the stage, Mecklenburg County was issued $39 million in CARES Act funding through the federal government, and that is due to the size of Mecklenburg County. So only the largest localities in the state got these kind of set distributions of funds. And so Mecklenburg County first used the funds to apply to their own eligible expenses that the county has incurred in responding to this crisis. That totaled about $13 million. And they now kind of have this pot of money left over that they're saying, we want to put this to the best possible use within the entire county. So Matthews was contacted by one of the county commissioners, Susan Rodriguez McDowell, about what does Matthews need? Because the county has put together a task force to help determine how to spend these funds. They have tasked Dina Diorio, the county manager, with putting together her proposal for how she would advise that these funds be spent, but the commissioners are also looking to bring their own suggestions to the table. And it's really, from the best we've been able to gather, it's kind of being able to put all of these things out in front of them and then choose accordingly. But Susan was very adamant. She wanted to make sure that the towns were well represented and that we got our fair share, so to speak, in receiving a portion of that allocation. So the things that she specifically brought to us that she felt would have good standing to be eligible for reimbursement were the town's own expenses that we have incurred related to responding to COVID-19, as well as some mortgage and rental and potentially utility bill assistance for people who live in the Matthews community who are struggling due to job loss from COVID-19. And then the other area was related to assisting businesses or from an economic development, economic stimulation kind of a standpoint, which is very, very broad. And Cindy is exactly right. The CARES Act language is very specific in talking about business interruption, revenue loss to small businesses. What town staff discussed with Susan was we as town staff do not feel that we are equipped to handle an application, evaluation, and distribution process for small businesses, as far as, what's the evaluation criteria, who's handling that. The other localities who have gotten into that business, they're often partnering with a bank, partnering with a consultant. It's not something that they're handling in-house. We have not gone down the path of, as staff, trying to evaluate, what would a third party look like and what would that cost and kind of how do you build those costs into it. We had some brief conversations with Kim, with the chamber, and there was a suggestion of perhaps the bank is already well that could handle this for the business community. So that was certainly one thing that was discussed as a potential. And then the other thing that we've seen, like Charlotte do with some of their money, because they got a separate allocation of CARES Act funding, is a large kind of marketing campaign, training campaign for their business community that is like Charlotte Open for Business, Thrive is in the name, that it looks like they're putting a lot of dollars behind. So we as the town are taking the responsibility of collecting this information. We've got our expenses. We've got a request from the help center to handle the mortgage and rental and utility bill assistance component of it. And then was looking to EDAC to see if there was an idea that could be generated out of this group that we would put forward. So we would be putting together 3 different asks to Rodriguez McDowell. We're also going to send it directly to Dina Diorio so that it's coming to the county from all angles, since we're not exactly sure what their vetting, evaluation, information sourcing process is. So we will handle putting it forward, but we're just looking for what does this group think it should be and what's the dollar amount. I will tell this group that as of the end of the day Friday, we found out that the county, as far as Dina putting together her proposal, that is happening much, much faster than we expected. And so she is supposed to be presenting to the Board of Commissioners on the 16th, which means she's putting together her plan now. So my goal out of today is if we can at least have the idea and then the dollar amount that we think would sufficiently cover whatever it is that we want to do. That's what we would put forward in our initial communication to the county. And then the exact details, the fleshing out of how every single dollar would be spent, that can happen, over the next couple of weeks. But we've at least got that placeholder to the county of what we're asking for on this front. And then we can, work on it as we go along here, since the timing is not our friend at all with this. And we're just trying to do what we can to be responsive to it.
Becky, I have a question.
Yep.
Let's say we just decided, and I'm throwing this out, we decided to deal with that we're going to try to fund business interruptions, like help businesses. Like, is there some expectation that we have to go, we need $10 million because here are the places who had business interruptions and this is how much money they lost. I'm trying to figure out how specific this has to be.
So
Is there a reason why we don't have the chat feature on the call?
Yeah, that would all be public record, and we're not set up to handle that right now.
Okay, because there's a great example is there's if you guys Google on your own machines, Loudoun Now, which is the Loudoun County paper, there's an article from today that details Loudoun County, Virginia, and the criteria it created for their CARES Act money, and then how each town developed their individual criteria, which I think is, a really great kind of cheat sheet.
Is it LOUDON?
LOUDOUN.
Proud loud native right here.
You're a native of Loudoun County.
It's great. Is every locality that got these has handled them a little differently. So some have said, yes, we're going to equally distribute to the towns or in our county, or here's chunks of money for each, and then the town is able to figure out how to best apply it in their community. Mecklenburg County has chosen a slightly different path, and so theirs was initially all going to stay at the county level. This distributing it out further than that has been kind of a late development, and so how we've been told is essentially put in the ask for what you specifically think you need, and then they'll decide if they're going to approve it or not. They're not just saying, 2 million Matthews, 2.5 million Mint Hill, and then we decide from there. So as far as how much do we need, I think the more that we can make an educated guess, the better off we are. But at the end of the day, it would really be, if we did not have a legitimate way to spend what we asked for the reasons we asked, then we would turn the money back into the county and they would redistribute it elsewhere.
Do you have any information on how many businesses in Matthews have successfully gotten PPP? Because I think part of the question is what are, to me, I'd want to triage the needs. What is the greatest need right now for business continuity and expansion for businesses in Matthews? Is there any way to know anything about that?
I'll jump in on that one. I don't have any facts and figures. I can tell you kind of colloquially that what we're hearing, what the chamber is hearing from a lot of our members is that they did apply for, and most have received some funding from PPP. Many of our businesses remain closed, or they're just starting to open this week. So I don't know that PPP is going to have been sufficient to have gotten them through. I know too that just about all of the restaurants I've talked to had to lay off their employees. They're all on unemployment right now. So we could probably send a poll out through the chamber and find out what chamber members did on PPP, but I can't really speak to it Matthews wide. We've got about 365 members in the chamber.
Let me offer another alternative. And Becky, by the way, you have any idea of how much money we are potentially talking about for town of Matthews for business?
No. In talking with Sarah Cunningham, their director of finance, not to get too in the weeds, but there's the potential that it's going to make more sense to take the town and the county expenses that are FEMA eligible and apply for that reimbursement first and use this pot of money for our match. Long story short, if that approach works, it actually frees up the amount available out of this 39 million because more of the town and county expenses would be covered by FEMA, and it would leave more of this pot available for community programs. So the first estimate that we heard was that the county was going to use about 13 million of it. The next estimate we heard, let me make sure that I've got my numbers right, it knocked that down by a number of millions of dollars. I can't remember exactly what it was. So bottom line, out of about 39 million, there could be as much as 30 million or so available countywide. How much of that they would want to commit to Matthews. I could do if you wanted to do it on a equal distribution kind of standpoint. If somebody wants to keep in, I can run that number real quick.
Well, it's more than a few $100s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, is there another way of looking at this? Certainly, relief for folks who are harmed, that's important. but so many are able to get the PPP and or the EIDL already. Is this an opportunity? Is it even within the spirit of this to fund the idea that we've long kicked around of a business incubator, rather than relief for existing businesses that have so many sources now available to them, and setting up the infrastructure to try and filter through applications from who is more deserving of additional relief? Do we use this to say, we want to help start the next generation of businesses around here? Some of those folks may be current business owners who need to restart in something different. But I don't know. That's why I wonder what the scope of the money is we're talking about. Is that an option for us to finally pursue that kind of initiative?
I want to make sure I understand. To get businesses into Matthews?
To help businesses get started in Matthews. Cindy, when I joined the EDAC way back in 2009 when it first started, one of our first initiatives was explore the idea of a business incubator concept to be able to help folks who are starting brand new businesses have a place where resources can be shared, where there could be mentors that could provide some guidance to them, some education provided to them, helping them to grow their business with the hopes, no guarantees, but the hopes that they would grow that a certain percentage of them would launch very successfully and remain in Matthews and add to their employment base. So we initially did some studies. We tabled it. We've come back to it from time to time. There wasn't a big appetite for carving out budget in the town's budget, as I understand it, for it over time. I don't know if this presents an opportunity for it or if it is even in the spirit of the fuzzy parameters that we have on this money.
And I'm not sure, and you would have to help me with this, Becky, because it's a wonderful concept, if that is what I'm reading as the intent of the CARES Act.
I'm with you, Cindy. I was pulling up what you sent earlier. Some of the wording is fuzzy, but kind of the three big things that you have to accomplish are that they're necessary expenditures incurred due to the public health emergency, due to COVID-19. They were not accounted for in any budget that was most recently approved as of March 27th, and they have to be spent between March 1st and December 30th of 2020. A big example that they give is related to providing economic support to those suffering from employment or business interruptions due to COVID-19 related business closures. So I think, to your point, Andy, you have to be able to maybe make a stretch that a business wasn't able to get started during COVID-19, or they stumbled during COVID-19, and this business incubator is providing a place for them to, pick themselves back up.
And it's not too far of a stretch to say that young businesses have especially been impacted by this. They haven't built their customer base. They haven't built their reputation, their brand, that they've, I've talked with business owners who opened their doors weeks before they were told to close down for 3 months. So it may not be too far of a stretch. I don't know. I'm just hearing fuzziness to the nature of it. I'm trying to connect to something else that we've long thought of in EDAC. Steve, what do you think?
I'm not sure. My concern with the with an incubator is it's kind of like it's been asked and answered. We've tried it and it didn't really get off the ground. And then, but I see the notion of using, hey, this money could push that right through. But just because we have the money, is that the thing to use it for? And is it in the spirit of my reading of the CARES Act is more of let's keep businesses still alive. It's not so much to support the growing of them, which I have a difference of opinion with where the focus needs to be, but I think the startups are where if we are about to go into a recession, I think that's where we should be putting the funds. But my concern is having sat on that group back in, what was it, 2010, even when we looked at what is now the Help Center, or the free medical clinic, we did all that work and it went nowhere. And I just don't know that the winds have changed enough for that to be viable.
Would y'all be okay with me sharing an idea that I put together since we last talked? And listen, after hearing the level of this conversation, now I'm feeling like a cartoonist with what I put together. So forgive me if this seems a little elementary. Lori, I've got the ability to share screen, right? I don't? I do. I'm going to try. Let's see what happens.
Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. So here's what I'm thinking, and it's coming largely off of, let me get this started. The conversation we had last time, and somebody had mentioned that the Love Matthews campaign from last summer kind of hit on some of these ideas that we're talking about now. So my thinking, and guys, please understand, this is not fully fleshed out, totally open to ideas and discussion. But I'm thinking maybe a Love Matthews 2.0 for this fall. What was done last summer was a month-long promotion. I think we could basically mimic that. My idea is we've already got the infrastructure for that through the town because the town's done this before. But last time, Becky, please tell me if I'm wrong, last time the focus seemed to be about the town employees, the town's residents, why we love being and living in Matthews. I'm thinking instead shifting it to local businesses. And if this comes together the way I'm hoping it will, it'll definitely support individuals and families as well. So promoting local businesses and restaurants, t-shirts, hats, whatever we need to do to kind of get the thing out there. Possible promotions, again, just off the top of my head, we could have one. It was a 4-week campaign last time, a week that's focused on restaurants, a week that's focused on our local retailers, maybe one that's on service industries. Randy last time talked about what I'm calling the street party. So perhaps that could be the culmination of this if, in fact, we're able to actually do things like that out in the public. And that's why I pushed it to the end in hopes that we could get together by then. Budget items, I tried to think this through. I don't have the first idea how to put numbers to this stuff, but my hope would be that the town would be able to provide labor to help design and implement because they've before. And I'm certain you're going to roll your eyes at me right now, but I'm guessing the Matthews Live people aren't nearly as busy as they hoped to be at this point. So maybe there would be some folks available to help out on that. I would expect some expenses perhaps to go toward clothing and promotional materials. Last time I talked about the gift card idea, I promise y'all I'm not pounding that, but I think it might work really nicely for this. The idea behind these gift cards is usually that big businesses will buy a bunch of them at one time and hand them out to their employees. And then the merchants agree to accept those gift cards at their retail shops or restaurants. If instead we use CARES money to purchase, and I arbitrarily said, what if we started with 1,000 of them at $25 each? Then hand them out. We can even have, the mayor handing them out, somebody prominent who would be good. It would be good to be seen doing this. Hand them out to local families, local residents. They're spending them at our local businesses. So yeah, we can use CARES Act money to purchase the first 1,000, distribute to local businesses. We need to also encourage larger businesses, the Harris Teeters, the hospitals, those companies, to buy more of them to give to their employees as well. They could be used at any business that signs up. But what I also think might be compelling about this is if we do have a second wave of coronavirus in the fall, these cards could still be used for carry out and delivery and things like that. The drawback is that last bullet. Well, there are probably a lot of drawbacks. The main drawback is that the merchant does pay a service fee on the transaction, usually about 2%. So I don't want to be foolish and ignore that. There are obviously pluses and minuses. So that's what I had in mind. Love to hear what y'all think about it.
As to service fee, and we talked about that earlier. Is that incurred at the time of transaction, or is that overhead that we can pay through CARES?
It's a great question. The cards would be purchased, I believe, using CARES Act money. But then if you buy one, Tim, and you go to Stumptown and you spend $25 at Stumptown, the vendor pays 25 plus 2% for accepting the card.
But to Tim's point, though, that administrative fee could be built into the cost, like an administrative overhead part of the ask, and so it could be reimbursed. Like when the business owner could submit that they had 100 transactions at 2%, and it's however many dollars, and then it could be reimbursed to them. So it would take a minute, but they would ultimately also get that back.
Yeah.
I would posit that putting all that money into gift cards are usually a really terrible proposition in retail for myriad reasons. But say, for instance, $25,000 in the gift cards. What I would counsel a client that came to me saying, should I buy 20? I would say to them, I would rather have you spend $25,000 on 1 month of retargeting, so that, anytime somebody is Googling restaurants in Matthews, they get a little ad that says, did you know that the restaurants in Matthews are the best restaurants in the world? And that ad starts following them. Because I would, can kind of tell you from experience that continue, from a marketing standpoint, repetition, you have to have a really good message and you have to repeat the message. And by the way, did I mention you have to repeat the message and you have to repeat the message? And so kind of the way in this day and age, especially because people are stuck in their homes and working, I would say a really thoughtful digital campaign that includes AdWords, that includes retargeting, that includes social media and paid social media, and the other elements that go with it, would have a significantly more return on investment. If we are talking about, as it sounds like Charlotte's talking about, a campaign to encourage people to patronize Matthews, and do a campaign that has a website attached to it that is where we're driving people to, that's a nice, clean, simple website about here's what's available for you to purchase, be it food, clothing, equipment, whatever it is in Matthews, and then back that up with a hearty campaign to go with it.
Know that they're mutually exclusive, though. I mean, could we not do both?
I question gift cards in general, but yeah.
But I think the gift card here, but don't forget that this is something that, as Kim mentioned, the mayor is handing out, right? They can choose, the punter or the customer or whoever received that card can choose to go anywhere with it. So then we'd also have the other piece of the marketing, which is, hey, use it in Matthews. These are the places to go use it, right? So in essence, that $25 is free. It's revenue given directly to the business, less 2%, but it's up to them. Hey, you're about to get whatever it is, say $25, whatever the gift card is.
Yeah. It's just an insanely expensive way. So in our world, there are a number of criteria that we use when we show a campaign is successful. And one of the baseline things is the cost per 1,000 impressions. And that's how many impressions we're talking about in the world we live in. They say the psychology side of advertising and marketing now, for somebody even to remember that you exist, you have to tell them you exist at least 20 times.
Sure.
It used to be 20 years ago, and now it's 20 plus. And so if I just look at those gift cards from a cost per 1,000, that's $25 for one, versus you can get in a digital campaign many multiples of that for $25.
Sure.
But that doesn't
But it's
transfer
also,
dollars.
that money is going to a marketing agency, right? It's not a conduit by which we get that money into a business's hands that's been closed.
Right. But then, then you get into looking at statistics and, and I don't know, I'd have to look at this and, what the turnaround is on a gift card. I mean, I know I'm sitting on a drawer full in here of gift cards from the last 10 years that have been exchanged in our family at various and sundry holidays that, that's the other challenge with gift cards, is their life cycle. They can take a while to circulate through the economy.
No, that's why I'm thinking where Kim was saying it's not just one thing, which is the gift cards. That was just one bullet point on our slide that encompassed all of those other items about marketing. This is just one. I mean, I equate the gift card things as a conduit by which you get the revenue into a business's hands. Similar to PPP, that money is not for the business owner. They use the business as a conduit to get it to the employee, right? At the end of the day, that's what they're doing. And I think the gift cards does the same thing. If it is 25,000, I mean, from the numbers that Becky's talking about, this 25,000 is nothing compared to what the ask could be, right?
Well, I think that everything you're saying, Kim, that relates to everything we talked about in the last meeting. And I would love to see that as a component of everything else. I mean, I think there's so much more we can be asking for as well. But we spent a lot of time going, we think this is a good idea to have some type of Matthews event to bring people into Matthews, and how we would do that. I don't have that marketing expertise, so I can't comment on gift cards, but I think what you are saying is what we have discussed, but I also think since learning more about the CARES Act, we have so much more we could be asking for.
That's my thought is, why don't we set a target of $2 million?
At least.
And how much can we, the 25,000 on 1,000 gift cards?
How do we back into it and say, this is why we need it?
Yeah. And then if we don't use it, we give it back.
If I understand Marcy correctly, and Marcy, jump in if I'm misstating here. I feel like what I'm hearing from you is, let's say you had 25,000 for marketing and then 25,000 for gift cards. And so you could look at that 25,000 in gift cards as a way to maybe directly get money into the hands of the businesses, Steve, to your point. But I think what I hear Marcy saying is that 25,000 that could be spent on gift cards, if properly applied to the correct ad buys, would generate much more than $25,000 in business, in dollars to the businesses. Is that right, Marcy?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And that's what I initially said. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I'm saying, let's do it all. Let's do the gift cards. Let's go for $100,000 as a budget for 3 months or 2 months, whatever it is, for the social media, right? Let's go large. Let's do it, right?
There's absolutely no reason not to. I mean,
yeah.
Well, I appreciate the enthusiasm. We want to be realistic
Tamp it down.
not have a request that is so large and without the right infrastructure to support it, that it comes off as y'all are dreaming and it gets kicked from a lack of feasibility. So,
Well, Becky,
I
do
think
you
there's a
have an
middle ground in
amount? Becky, do you have an amount that you think would?
I'd say for some, I'm not saying that this has to follow suit, but the town has incurred $183,000 in actual expenses or expected expenses between now and December 30th. And the request that we will be putting forth for mortgage and rent assistance will be in the neighborhood of $250,000. If you look at about $30 million in a fund based on our statistical population representation of Mecklenburg County, it's about $864,000. So if you backed out the 183, backed out the 250, if you were saying Matthews gets a perfectly fair share of that pie, there's still a fair bit of money left. I did the math a minute ago, about $433,000. But that would be presuming that there aren't going to be other programs put forward by the county that the county's going to say, well, this is for everyone in Mecklenburg County. So it's not just the towns putting in requests for this extra 30 million. They're going to be coming from all over the place. So it's got to be a number that they feel could fit in and not be overly taking away from all the other stuff that they're trying to do. I don't know if that's an answer, but that's the best answer I have.
Becky, what do we give annually to nonprofits locally from Matthews Alive?
How about 120-ish thousand? It fluctuates a little bit every year, but about 120.
I'm wondering if the infrastructure is already in place there. We know who our local nonprofits are. We know most of them are hurting. Is that an opportunity? And and maybe this is going outside of EDAC in a way, but yet short of being able to identify which businesses need things, we know that nonprofits are not going to get their grants, I suspect, from Matthews Alive since the event's not taking place. Is covering their loss and or more an option here too?
It could be, yeah. I had posed the question when they were talking about canceling Matthews Alive of, what's the level of pain that this is going to inflict on the nonprofit community? Like anything, it's a loss if you don't get a grant that you're relatively used to. But what was relayed back to me was that none of the individual grants were likely going to be enough to break a nonprofit, or
Right.
have it really, really impact their operations. But
Totally
obviously, but I think that's it's viable. It's a legitimate loss that we can point to and say, they are experiencing due to this.
Randy, a lot of the nonprofits that used to do Matthews Alive said that the ROI for Matthews Alive wasn't worth the 4 days of volunteerism and build out the whole 9 yards to be there. But I think if you extended it to what you're saying, sort of a stipend for all nonprofits, that would be, I think, a realistic box to check from that aspect of it. And then sort of in listening to this a little bit, I'm just going to throw out a wild, out left field kind of thing, piggybacking on what Kim said. We used to have Taste of Matthews and things like that. Could you begin to then target like a large group like restaurants and breweries and say, you know what, we're going to pump in $5,000 per every restaurant and brewery in town, and we're going to have a Taste of Matthews, in which you would go from establishment to establishment, social distancing, and they would prepare appetizers or hors d'oeuvres, have whatever they need to do until they run out of it. But we infuse that money. That gives them the exposure to the public. It gives them something to do and feel worthy of something. And then if you want to go to week 2 with the retailers, maybe there's some opportunity there as well. But maybe there's different projects for different players. But it seems like, it would be a sort of great sort of farm to fork, fork to table, food to table kind of event that gets the community invested. And if it means you're doing a stipend for nonprofits, maybe they're littered throughout the town. At least and their give back have to be exposed on the street as well, in lieu of the fact that we're giving them some money too, so they get some exposure. I'm just trying to think of how we incorporate things that the chamber has always done, but to Steve's point, take it to a larger scale.
It's like a Matthews Restaurant Week in our own version of it.
Yes,
We would give them the money to do it.
correct.
I like that.
Like
I love Kim.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. If we use
Please.
Kim's framework and we threw, let's say, $100,000 and somehow divided out 4 weeks, 25 grand, but also her earlier slide that had all the different items in terms of the like t-shirts, hats, and stuff like that. 25 grand towards that. 25 grand toward the marketing. We'll put in something, Marcy. Maybe it's not 25. Something to the gift cards, because I think that is at least that's something tangible that people can hold and use and say, hey, this is part of it. I think for 125 grand over the course of a month or 5 weeks, and however we set it up in terms of the calendar, that could be solid. And I think it would drive, I think the payback would be a lot bigger than that 100 or 125,000 investment and what's coming back out of it, right?
And you show up at the bar or restaurant, and that's where you get your Love Matthews 2.0 t-shirt.
Yeah, similar to, I mean, take the playbook from, what was it, Red Brick, right? I mean, shoot, they've done enough events where distributing that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, we put it out there, and it was self-sustaining fun, because through sponsorships and stuff like that, the business owners reap the benefit from that aspect of it. I guess the question would be on the more global Matthews side, from a marketing standpoint. I wouldn't want to leave out folks outside the perimeter of downtown. Is it possible to sort of inject the funding to marketing Matthews as a whole, the live, work, play, the whole 9 yards as an adjunct to this piece as well?
Yeah, I think the mission of it needs to be the whole, all of Matthews, not just Windsor Square, all the everything.
Yeah, I would want to defer to Marcy's expertise, like with the swag. Just trying to go back to the CARES Act funding requirements. If it's meant to support the local businesses, I guess I'd be a little suspect that a t-shirt that you could make that connection, that, you know, John Q. Citizen walking around with a Love Matthews t-shirt or Love Your Local Matthews. I don't know, as opposed to like an ad buy that said shop local. Or I don't know if the t-shirt said shop local, if that would do it.
What if
I'm
the t-shirts?
I'm having a hard time with the swag.
Well, and the swag obviously is negotiable, but what if the CARES Act money was used to design and purchase the t-shirts, give them to the restaurants, and the restaurants can sell them?
Yeah, and you have to come in to the restaurant to get it. Sure.
And that's what Red Brick did with all the t-shirts, right? You had to go to that's where the distribution points were, right? You had to go to the restaurant to get it. And that's kind of the idea behind the gift cards. You have to go in there to use it, get the product.
And if we need to tie it to this, the t-shirt can say, I survived coronavirus 2020. That would be pretty cool.
Or spring 2020.
There, that's the justification, right? The spring wave. The spring wave 2020. I like aspects of a lot of what's been shared here. Can we do the nonprofit thing and the open for business thing at the same time? That's kind of consistent with what we do in this town too. We support our nonprofits and our businesses. Can we do both of them?
I'm thinking you had the 4 weeks, right? In services, that's kind of a tough one for, come in and check out my auto body shop, but you also, the nonprofits and the services could be combined in that week, right? Come check out Back Porch Treasures, or maybe that's retail, but could we do the two of those together, right?
I love the idea of doing all of this, so I'm not trying to, and because if we could do that, that would be awesome. And Becky or Kim, you'll have to help me, maybe Becky more so you'll have to help me, because I'm reading through, and one of the very first bullet point is to what you get money for is expenditures related to the provision of grants to small businesses to reimburse the cost of business interruption caused by required closures. And I'm only bringing that up because I would hate for us to put together something and go, oh, this is what we want to do. And they go, well, that's not really what we were looking for. Payroll support, unemployment insurance cost is in here. Expenses reasonably necessary to function of a government.
I feel you might be reading the CARES Act from the federal level, communicating to the states.
I am. You're right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it gets broader, or rather more specific, as you go down in terms of what the definition of what fits in.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's true.
So,
how Loudon stuff, the towns who came up with the within the Loudoun County, that some of the towns are doing something very similar to what we're talking about.
With CARES money.
I'm assuming.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I'm asking.
Yeah, it looks to be the county distributing to the towns. But they did it a little bit different, right? They just said, hey, town, here you go. Then what are you going to do with it? As opposed to this, an ask. But
Becky, you wanted to throw us a lifeline there?
Yeah, so the wording that Cindy is referring to, that is what they're calling a non-exhaustive list. So those are examples. They are not things that you like, oh, it has to be one of these things. These are just examples. It is very broad. I think, at least again, the little bit of direction that we have, and we are kind of picking up bits and scraps and crumbs and whatever, but that is that anything that would arguably support the business community is, I think, fair game to put forward as an idea. The worst thing we would hear is no.
So what you need from us today is to say this is what we want to do, or this would be our idea as a group, is what I'm understanding. Is that right?
With some framework of why. Yes, pretty much.
Then why don't we go with that? Yeah.
Is 300,000 within the range here of what we could be talking about?
Absolutely.
I mean, do we do, can we do something 150 for our area nonprofits, 150 towards a promotion really targeted to the retail level, and restaurants and bars towards John's idea, with the t-shirts thrown in there? Is that big enough budget?
Becky, is that realistic with what the town plans to ask for as well?
Don't have a crystal ball. It doesn't seem crazy out of line. Just trying to add up, if it were 300, that would put us at 7. That would put us at 733 across all lines.
Sounds good to me.
Becky, do we know what the expected shortfall is going to be from like the reduction in sales tax revenue and stuff for the town? Sales tax and all the other. Is there a number?
So we are projecting a decline next year. There's a couple different models. We went with the most conservative model based on county's economist and what the county was projecting. We are not allowed to use CARES Act funding for revenue replacement. So that's something that we prohibit from doing. But it sounds like grants to businesses for their revenue loss is more of fair game.
I was just trying to get an idea of what that.
Are you looking for
like relative to how much we're about to lose, and if we're about to lose, I don't know, $15-20 million in the ideas we can put in 150 or whatever the number, 300, whatever that number is that we come up with, to try to save that or to get that back, right? To try to drive people to, hey, get out of your house. You know, people are open. Let's go. It might give. I was just thinking that might shed some more light on whether or not it's a realistic number. I mean, the whole idea is to get people out and back into the shops, back into the restaurants, the bars, get them going, right? And ultimately, I think get the sales back up, the sales tax.
Yeah, so we've got a couple different revenue streams. So we've got the meals and lodging, which is our tourism fund, but then we do also have regular sales tax. So for the sales tax that is spent on other things, that supports our general fund, and then the meals and lodging supports our tourism fund. So we don't like to lose any of it, but we were expecting bigger dips on the on the tourism side. Let me see if I can find it. Sorry, the font is tiny. I don't want to hold you guys up.
Well, Becky,
I've got to find a different version that I can read.
At the town board, we talked about parklets and allowing restaurateurs or breweries, whatever, to expand onto the sidewalk to gain the sidewalk activity or business. I'm wondering, by let of same extension, if we took the what I call the Beantown lot, because I don't have any other name for it, the lot next to Beantown, and set up a temporary pop-up market location for businesses to use. It's their outdoor space, whether it be a retailer or a restaurant. Is there a possibility to sort of subsidize that in some respects, or is there a possibility to use this money to subsidize the parklets, which we talked about on Monday night?
The what?
Parklet. What it is it's occupying parking spaces to make outdoor dining space.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
And by extension, increasing the capacity of a restaurant or a retailer.
Yeah.
We'd always, at Red Brick, we always talked about setting up a big tent in the Beantown lot, and it'd be good on Oktoberfest, and any business that wanted to participate in that Oktoberfest would set up a subsection of that, and that and sell their wares, very much like the pop-up markets we used to hold in that location. But that's a pretty large financial investment to get a tent or something of that size. But again, you could offer up the parklets or pop-up market type of concession stand areas and stuff like that. So, I mean, I guess the real question is, is the county just going to come back to the level and say, well, every town has a number of population. We're going to take the population, divide it by percentage, and then sort of say, you can maybe borrow this amount of money or take this amount of money up to that point. But it seemed, obviously in Mecklenburg County, they're going to hold on to as much as possible. So I think, to Becky's point about having some realistic number that doesn't seem to be too hog wild, probably I think would be at least reasonably accepted.
Does it make sense? I mean, Kim, you had the vision or the kind of the framework started. Marcy, obviously you had the marketing wizardry. Then Cindy, you're looking at and from the perspective of being able to encapsulate that in a written document or whatever needs to be done for the proposal. Could we split the three of you plus, I mean, I'll join or anybody else that wants to and kind of flush this out? Because if I understand that right, Becky, we got to have that done pretty dang fast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I really just need a title and a sentence and a dollar amount for today. Working title is fine. But yeah, the fleshing out over the next two weeks or so. We don't know what their timeline is beyond once the information's presented.
Sure.
So you could come back at any point after that and say, hey, we need more information on X. For reference, just for the benefit of the group, we are projecting $355,000 less in our tourism fund revenues next year than what we budgeted last year. That fund had been growing by multiple percentages a year. So it's way low. So the actual hit of what we would have had if not for COVID, probably in the neighborhood of about $400,000 at least. On the general fund side, we're only projecting to be down about $40,000 next year. But again, those funds were growing at multiple percentages a year. So we were probably down $100,000, $250,000 on that end, if that helps.
Well, for what it's worth, I would normally say that Matthews is much more than retail businesses, and it is indeed. But I think that this kind of a grant, we need to make a splash. And as such, I support some combination of what both Kim and John have brought forward. A splash of something visible for maybe primarily benefiting arguably one of the most hardest hit sectors of our business world, and that is the restaurants and drinking establishments. And we've been successfully growing those presences in Matthews. So something that helps them in a big splash way is good. But I would argue balancing it with some help to the nonprofits who lost maybe token amounts indeed from Matthews Alive, but real amounts from overall impact of COVID. So if there's some way we can do both of those, I think that would be an outstanding use. Now I threw out a figure of 150. I don't know if I'm thinking big enough numbers for those or not, or maybe in combination I'm thinking too big. But just kind of combination of what you said, Becky, about what they get in from Matthews Alive, and or what it might take to do some sort of a retail event like John has described. Just throwing that out as a possibility.
On the nonprofit side, and I think, Kim, you could probably talk to the chamber side, but the free medical clinic golf tournament was scrubbed. So that's a $50,000 to $60,000 chunk of money right there that has to be made up someplace else later on in the year. And so I suspect that from the help center and the chamber tournament and Nate Huggins piece and on and on, everybody's probably in that $30,000 to $60,000 window that do these things regularly. That was a big, huge loss in one fell swoop.
COS Kids, I'm on the board there, just for full disclosure, and we have our Backyard Blues event in first weekend in October, and we're not doing that, and that was a big positive revenue hit for us last year, and that we're going to have to make up some other way.
So in terms of moving forward here and getting something written down for Becky, is 300 then the number, as you said, Randy? How we split that out between let's be honest, I think we're all just checking where the wind goes, right? in coming up with a number. But it sounds like the 300 is below, or it fits within, and Becky, correct me if I'm wrong or if my math is wrong, but fits within kind of what we're thinking relative to the ask and what the town may get. And then we can parcel out how we want that. I think Marcy's right. The whole idea is to market the daylights out of it, right? And so that we have that brand messaging, love Matthews, and then get that message out there. And we will have failed if there's one or two people in Matthews that have never heard of this come November, right? That we failed. I mean, for that amount of money, holy Christmas, right? We should be able to knock people in the International Space Station should be saying, wow, I really want to get back to Earth to go to Matthews, right? If that's the amount of money that maybe I'm just cheap in my business, but we can do some crazy marketing with that, I think.
It's not as crazy as you think. If you spent, again, that would get back to your biggest bang for the buck. That if you had $100,000 a month for 3 months and did it all on all these various digital platforms, then yes. But if you're going to dilute it, then no.
Okay. I mean, is that the plan forward? Can we take Kim's framework and kind of throw some meat on the bones and then add maybe the numbers to it to kind of parcel out? If we start with that 300 and just say, hey, that's probably a reasonable, I know it sounds like we're going backwards on it, starting with a 3 and backing out to how we divvy that out against the things. But given the time constraints and the realistic notion that 300 is about where the town might get allocated anyway, along with everything else. I mean, is there a consensus that that's the way to go? Anybody?
I think it sounds good. That includes the nonprofit component too, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think you can eat that up pretty readily. I mean, so I don't think you're going to be giving any money back.
No.
Well, do we need to go to 350, you think?
Sure, why not?
Well, see, that's what I'm struggling with, is because I'm hearing two things. One is why not? And the other thing is, well, let's not be so far out there that we don't have a shot. So we've got to kind of figure out where that magical number is of,
And I thought from Becky's numbers that the 300 was the relevant, but I could be doing math wrong.
And just so I'm clear, we're talking about 150,000 in direct relief profits.
I think so. I would say that whatever number we come up with, I think it's good optics that half of it goes to area nonprofits and half of it goes to the big splash that we're talking about for retail.
And I'm not saying that we need to have it all fleshed out today, but what is the mechanism or application for how we would determine what nonprofits get how much?
We could ask them to submit their, Kim, what's the tax form where they submit annually? The 940, 990,
990,
and allocate based on proportion of their annual budget?
to be decided by this committee?
Yikes.
That's
Randy, my understanding is there's about 70 nonprofits. That number may be higher or lower today, but if you take the 70 nonprofits and divide it into the $150,000, you're talking about a plus minus $2,000 delta. Do you just cut it across the board and just do it that way? I mean, I think that would save an awful lot of aggravation of saying, well, let me see your 990 and what percentage was this and what percentage was that.
I know, kind of like the $1,200 stimulus check.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And to some of those with larger budgets, that means nothing then.
The
70?
The United Way Foundation for the Carolinas has a special COVID fund for all the nonprofits in the county to apply to for COVID relief. So maybe just making a donation to that fund, or talking to United Way and Foundation for the Carolinas. They may have a great idea of what's hanging out there.
I mean,
That might help us come up with the idea of how to distribute, but I mean, we can decide, maybe for Becky's purposes here, decide whether we like the idea of half the funds go to nonprofits one way or the other somehow.
mhm.
Yeah, I think we all agree that nonprofits need to be supported. The 150 number, I think we all landed on that. How it gets distributed, I think that's a discussion for another day, because that's going to be I'm sure it'll be a long discussion, right? But I think we can agree that that's the right thing to do in terms of, we have to support the nonprofits and let's get them involved, and we want to do that. But coming up with the answer of what that looks like and the machinations of it, I don't know that this is the venue for that right away.
Yeah, right.
I will say, I think there would need to be some kind of mechanism in there of tying this back to COVID. I'd be a little concerned about an across the board if there's, say, a nonprofit in town where, their entire annual budget is $2,000 and they still earned it. It's tricky. I'm just trying to read through as we're talking. But I think we would have to be able to show, or the nonprofit would have to be able to show, that they incurred a loss from COVID. Maybe you start with the Matthews Alive group because that's really easy. We can point to, you would have gotten 4,000. Can we get you close to it through that? So again, we don't need to decide it today. We've just got to keep that in mind of being able to tie it back to COVID.
And we could also tie it, similar to what you're saying, we could also have a relatively easy grant request process, or maybe I'm using the wrong word, but if, take Nate, if he were able to come and we say, hey, if you had an event that was canceled because of COVID, show us the last 3 years financial impact on you. And that then because then it's directly tied to the COVID, right? In terms of disbursement. And you've shown that, hey, you've done it, and when I start a nonprofit tomorrow and say, I was going to have this event, I can't show that I ever had anything in the past, so that, to try to weed out any, reprobates. But I think there's a handful of probably 15 or 20 nonprofits that we know of that have events that got canceled, and that's the big fundraiser for them, right?
Yeah.
And I'd imagine it's a relatively easy one-page document that says, hey, here's last 3 years, here's what we made on this event. Here's what we took in. Here's what it cost us. Here's the bottom line. And our request is X, right?
Yeah, it could be done. It just will require a lot of us on this call and or someone else reviewing each of those. And I know John's point there. That's why everyone in America is getting the $1,200 below a certain level of income, because it was much easier to do that, to get it done quickly, than it was to look at each individual needs. But if we could do something like that with some guidelines there, maybe we just somehow divide them up into the top third, middle third, bottom third, based on some of that criteria. And there's 3 different specific dollar figures that could be available based on what group you fall in. We could come up with a way, I think, to make it happen in as simple a way as we could.
Yeah.
But Becky, for what you need now, you need guidance on an amount and the general intended application of it. Is that right? You're on mute, my friend.
Audio, Becky.
Thanks. I've got 300,000 total, 150,000 in direct relief to nonprofits, and then 150,000 for the business community. And we're talking about a marketing campaign to promote frequenting these businesses. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Becky, on the nonprofit, I just have one small request. If in the request you would word it as nonprofit and not as 501c3, unless anybody has an objection. And I know you said nonprofit, but I just want to make sure you all know the chamber is a nonprofit, is not a 501c3, so is not eligible for any PPP money at all. So if it's possible, and if you all agree, I'd love for the chamber to be able to make a request for these funds as well. We've had to cancel all of our events.
Of course you did. Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is probably try to find some generic wording that's something like $150,000 in support of the business community. And I'm going to be submitting this to Hazen tonight. And then I'm going to see if I can get on the phone tomorrow with Sarah Cunningham, the finance director with the county. And I want to run this idea by her and make sure that she thinks it would fly from a legality standpoint. Just in the little bit of reading that I'm doing, it seems like a lot of other communities, it's more of like a direct grant to a small business instead of a larger marketing campaign, because those direct grants are clearly listed in the CARES Act language as being viable. That's there. The county does seem to feel like there is room for interpretation on these other things. I just want to make sure that what we're talking about would fit within what they're thinking. And then we can tweak accordingly based on that feedback.
And for clarity, Becky, and others, Marcia in particular, the marketing portion of this will come from the business side, the 150 for the business side? As a question.
I would think so.
So we take the marketing portion out of the business side and we give the nonprofits the full 150. I'm just asking.
That's an interesting question. I mean, if we're going to do a week for the nonprofits, then probably needs to be a portion of it allocated to that, right?
So if we're doing 1 week, 25%, maybe 25% comes from the nonprofit share and 75% from the for-profit share.
Yeah. I think that's reasonable. I mean,
And to Marcy's point also, excuse me for interrupting, sorry, is that the marketing campaign should be a time-driven thing, not just a one event. You know, it should have a sustained period of time. Now, what is that? We'll have to decide. But yeah, it can't just be one blurb and that's it. It'll take a time to get this out over and over again.
sure. I think the biggest piece is going to be the marketing side, right? And there's another, I mean, if we agree that we're only using Matthews media companies, right? Or Matthews ad agencies, right? I mean, we keep it all local, kind of walk the talk, right? So are we there?
We're at a number.
Okay.
There will be some other meetings going forward, I think, on this.
I guess in general, Becky, I think, can we say that 150 and 150, one for nonprofits, one for business, and the marketing will come from a combination of both of those? Is that Can that fly? Or you have to say specifically?
Can the marketing is geared more towards the business side, isn't it? The retail side? I mean, that's what would that be the purpose of
Good
it?
point, Randy.
Yeah. The nonprofit is, I mean, there's going to be a portion of it for the admin costs, maybe, I don't know, maybe in the reaching
Okay,
out
so-
to them.
Your point is that the just for constructing this thing, for Becky's point of view, is that the 150 will go to nonprofits, and the marketing of this whole campaign will come out of the 150 for the business.
I'm thinking so because the 150 side is just mainly, the retail bit side is just mainly for the business benefit.
No, it's for Matthews, but it's for Matthews, period. But I understand.
Yeah.
Will we not be devoting a week to promoting nonprofits then?
I would think so.
I just have to think of how we do that to the general community. I mean, like,
Becky, do you have to break down how much of this will go toward admin and marketing and how much won't?
At some point, not
But
for
not-
tonight, but
'Cause right now, Becky, you just needed the number, a sentence, or like a headline, right?
yeah, that was where we landed on get something in front of them. We know it's a tall order to have it flushed out on such short order. So get that in front of them tonight and then keep working to flush it out over the next week.
I think I know how Congress felt about that third week of March. Well, we got to put together something. What do you want to call it? Let's call it PPP. How much money? I have no idea. Where are we going to spend? I don't know. Let's just throw something against the wall.
Did a great job with it too.
And we'll figure out the rules over the next 2 months.
Pass the bill and then you can read it.
Yeah. Just say yes.
Just say it's right.
All right, can we, so then if that one's tied up with a bow, Becky has what she needs. Are we good then, like offline, setting up a meeting, Kim, Marcy, Cindy, or it can be everybody, trying to flush out more of this and kind of more of the details and see how this is gonna work?
I think so.
Okay.
Well, if you're doing it by Zoom, just set up that meeting and then those who want to participate, just all Zoom in.
Yeah. Okay.
Lori, we look forward to your summary of this meeting.
She's a whiz. She's got it figured out.
I know she is.
I would like you to clarify though, do you want to try to meet in a small group or is the intent to have the whole group here? Because that will change how we have to advertise and if it's going to be an open meeting or not.
I got
That
you.
doesn't
I think
have to
a
be
small
decided today,
group.
but it needs to be decided before we actually set a meeting.
I'm thinking we set it as a small group.
Okay.
And if everybody wants to attend, they can.
No, once you
No.
hit the quorum, then it becomes an open
Oh,
meeting and we are legally required to do
Meeting
certain things.
Gotcha.
So
So Lori's asking us to back out, is that it? Lori, you're asking somebody to back out?
I am not at all asking somebody to back out. Nice.
What is
to
a quorum? What is a quorum for our group?
Quorum is 5, so you can do 4 or fewer members
Okay,
without having
That's
an
simple.
open meeting.
that's easy.
Okay. We'll keep it under a quorum.
Okay. And before we end, Kim, can I ask you to send that document to me?
Sure. If I send it tomorrow, is that soon enough?
Not a problem. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Sure.
So if it is a small group, how do we set up the time, agree on a time and stuff?
You just let me know when you want that to be done and I'll set up the meeting for you. Or if you need me to help you make the arrangements to get everybody's availability, I can do that as well.
Do you have a tool to figure out the availability?
Doodle poll. Yes.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay. So I'm sorry, can you tell me who exactly you want in that group?
Was it Kim, Cindy, Marcy?
And
Anybody else want in on it? Tim, did you want it?
No.
Oh, okay. Randy?
If you want me to, I will. But no, those are the 3 central people.
Okay.
Please
I'll
Randy,
include
join
great
if you
job.
like. I said I'll join if there's no one else who wants to be on there.
I've got 4 right now: Steve, Kim, Cindy, Marcy.
Whoa,
Oh, I'm sorry. You're not part of that?
well, if it was 4, if 4 is the max.
4 is the max for the small group.
Okay, so Kim, Cindy, Marcy, Randy.
Okay.
I'm unavailable next week, Lori.
Okay.
I am leaving town on Thursday, the 22nd for 4 days.
That's
the beauty of Zoom. You can do it anywhere.
I know,
I'm
but
kidding.
I'm with
I'm
my
kidding.
grandkids and you can't.
I'm kidding. I'm joking.
You guys, I'm sorry to do this, but I've got a 6 o'clock call, so I've got to
Me
run.
too.
Okay.
Bye.
I must also, folks.
All right.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. So moved.